God's Spirit moves in unexpected ways. Spirit's unexpected ways are characterized by joy and by love. These two words, love and joy, are common in Christian vocabulary, so much so that their very important meanings can often be obscured or overlooked. So let's refresh ourselves briefly. Love is that great, deep, universe-spanning feeling that God has for you. Remember, God crafted you individually. Though God is sufficient all by himself, he longed for a relationship with you, so he created you. So each of you is kind of a big deal. Joy is that soul-level tasting and knowing of God's goodness. It remains as a stabilizing presence no matter what is happening on the surface of our lives. In today's reading from Acts, we encounter this movement, this love and joy. The 5 verses that we were given are just a fraction of the whole story. In a nutshell, the Apostle Peter pauses during his day to pray. And as he does so, he sees a vision from God that challenges his boundaries, his precepts of God's expectations for a good and spiritual life. You see, Peter was an observant Jew, someone whose life was guided by the religious strictures of Hebrew scriptures, the Torah. Those rules, those practices gave his life focus and purpose. He was one of God's chosen people. And because of that, because of his special relationship with God, he learned to live in certain ways. For example, eat this type of food and avoid this type of food. Associate with these people and not with these people. On that day, however, God's vision to him showed him a new way, cracked his spiritual barriers and broke open a new path. That vision was so real, so deeply, undeniably authentic, that Peter knew in his deepest self, in his soul, that it was guidance from God. And to reinforce the direction of this vision, as Peter awoke, strangers, Gentiles, those people, the ones to avoid, knocked on his door and asked to talk with him. Peter unhesitatingly welcomed them in, and as a result, 42 verses later in the chapter, the Spirit fell on them. The great Spirit of God, invisible but joyful, lovingly powerful, fell upon these outsiders and made them insiders. And from that point, the church, which at that time had been a purely Jewish institution, began opening up to non-Jews, to people like us. In essence, what happened was an unexpected movement of the Spirit, impelled by love. What was required was the willingness of Peter to go in an unexpected direction, to let go of normal, acceptable, safe, and to take a chance that God actually was in control. And God was able to turn the challenging and uncomfortable into the beautiful and blessed. We, St. Philip's, have been called to follow the unexpected movement of the Spirit many times over the past few years. Most of us can speak to this, taking the chance on going back to church after past struggles in a church. Taking the chance on going to church which doesn't look anything like the church you attended in the past. Taking a chance on going to church at all. 7 years ago, Nicole and I took a chance at a small rural church without much money in the bank, against most conventional statistical wisdom, would be able to provide for our family. And here we are. Here we are, having taken those risks, walked in the new way, followed the new path, and we all found ourselves welcome. We found ourselves genuinely valued. And we found that here we have a family and a home. Interestingly, this past week, I found out that our advice is being sought. Small church down in Atlanta, Georgia is struggling to stay open and begin reaching out to different dioceses, different parts of the Episcopal Church, which are growing, to see if the growing places could offer this little church some advice. One member of this church down in Atlanta reached out to Elise Johnstone, our diocesan canon to the ordinary, the priest who assists the bishop, to see if she could offer some advice. They called Elise and they said, "We're dying. You got any advice on how to grow?" You know what her response was? Y'all. She reached out to St. Philip's, partly because she works with Melanie Yankee, right? Melanie's right down the hall from her. Partly because I brag about you all the time when I'm up at the diocese, and I have for 7 years now. In fact, now that I think about it, I wonder if she quietly groans when I come around. Right, another St. Philip's story. It's like the uncle that won't stop talking. So she reached out to me and she said, "Can your church provide any advice for this little church? Because there's a similarity in your stories, right?" So she reached out to connect our two churches and see if the movement of the Spirit here can inspire the movement of the Spirit in Atlanta. And like the Apostle Peter in today's reading, your faithfulness, your willingness to listen to God's voice, to challenge your own safe boundaries, and to walk in the new way where God leads you is heard and noted here and 400 miles south of here. You have followed the love, followed the joy, and found a good path. Well done, my friends. Well done. May we continue along this good, unexpected, and blessed path.